I'm Jason Sylvia, and this is the Creative Capital Show. A show about creative people and how those creative people turn into entrepreneurs by taking their creativity and turning it into a business and facing all the trials and tribulations along the way. You know, it's been almost 30 episodes in, and it's been quite a ride. Throughout the course of this show, I have met artists, entrepreneurs, creatives, business owners, founders, operators, and anything and everything in between. With that being said, I've noticed that sometimes the older episodes of any podcast can get lost in the shuffle, which is a shame, because the older episodes of this podcast have some incredible gems of knowledge shared by the guests. Therefore, this episode will be the first ever Creative Capital Show podcast mixtape, where I have handpicked the best segments from the first 10 episodes for you, the listener. Maybe these segments will help you start your own creative project, your own business, or at the very least, provide you with some insight and some entertainment. At the end of the day, I hope you enjoy listening to them as much as I have enjoyed recording them. And first up, from episode 1, we have independent musician David Alves, and his thoughts on standing out, being on top of your game, knowing when to reach out to others, and the benefits of collaboration.
There's so much stuff behind every little thing that you're doing. Like knowing everything there is to know about the mic that you're using. It's low end, it's high end. What is best for the voice that you're using, the instrument that you're using, the room that you're playing in? What is the ambience of the music? What is the sound reflection of the music that you're into? The room that you're in. How is that going to sound? Are drums going to sound dead in there? Is it like you can make an album yourself, and I'm sure you can research all of this. But by the time you're done researching all of this, you're on your way to being a sound engineer. Like, to keep all of this stuff in mind it's a lot, you know? And quite frankly, a lot of musicians are concentrated on making the music, getting it out to people on that end of things. Very rarely is there a musician who is so dedicated that not only are they doing that end, the performance, the writing part of it, the getting noticed from people, like obtaining audience, that kind of thing. Then they have to do the whole branding part of it, which I'm sure we'll get into later. And then they're also doing I'm going to record myself and make myself sound good and not use too much compression and not use the wrong audio and then like have people tear it apart. And like, this is like, okay, you can be somebody who records it's a recording. It's my music getting out there. But we're in a time right now where there are so many independent labels, so many independent musicians that you have to stand out among those people. Now, yeah, you're going to be recording it in your room in some makeshift studio, but you still got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah, go for it.
You still need to know your shit.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I'm glad we got that. I've been holding back the swears this whole time. Good.
Oh, fuck it. Go for it.
All right, sweet. Okay, awesome. Good. Dang it. All right. But yeah, and I've been having long talks with Kyle over at Railroad Park, the studio that I'm recording at right now. We've been talking along because he's a musician, turned sound engineer, still a writer and everything like that, and he's excellent. He's got a great ear, he's got a great ear for sound, and that's why I'm recording that album with him, and that's why I'm recording Crooks the Scourge album with him. He's just got a great ear for sound, and I think that guys like him will always be relevant because he's innovative, and he's got a great ear for sound. He also knows his limit. If he's tired, if he knows he's not hearing something right, and he will just minutely take it. Oh, I think something's off there. I think there's something out of tune. I think this is coming, like something's coming in early, and I'm like, I didn't hear that, but he did, and you can see it in the waves, and I'm like, oh my god. And like, there's a lot of things that have advanced where you can just record a whole bunch of takes, just take one of those takes or piece it together out of like 80 takes of the same thing, and piece it like with that end of it. Yeah, that has made it easier, but there's an adverse side to that where you have so much that you're working with now that you need to organize it. Too much of a good thing will make an album sound horrible too.
So speaking of that, because I think that brings up another interesting point, It's like more of like a two-part question.
Sweet.
The first part, with technology and the way things are now, you can literally do everything yourself. You can record everything
if you have the knowledge.
Right. You can record everything. You can mix it down. You can then put it out on your streaming platform of choice. With social media, you can run your own promotions.
Yeah.
You can have your own .com website. You can make your own merch. You can literally go from end to end and be a one-person show or one-band show or whatnot, right?
Right now, you're talking about somebody who's doing this full time. Just to let you know.
Yeah, and is that necessarily a good thing? Like, is that a good thing that like?
Yeah,
of
course.
Should every artist be doing every little thing themselves, or like you were saying, or should the artist be more focused on just the music and that's it, and then farm that out to other people?
It depends on the artist.
Gotcha.
It really depends on the artist. I think I'm coming from a background of like, first of all, when I was in my first band, I was like, no, we're a band. We're doing everything together. Nobody's playing with anybody else. We're just focusing on this, that kind of thing. That was my mentality in the beginning. I was very possessive about my music. After that band broke up and I was networking with all sorts of musicians, the best things that I've done musically has come from networking with other musicians, networking with other people who have different ears. That's why I think the sound engineer, the producer, will always be relevant, because if you're a professional musician and you want to sound good, you need as much input on this thing that you're doing before you put it out. And that's why somebody with an ear that hasn't seen the song in its creation from its first incarnation, when you were just plugging it on a guitar, hitting on drums, singing it out loud, however it was that you composed the song, to like when you wrote the lyrics, wrote the melody line, to how it is today, and then now you're recording it, you have such an intimate and biased look on that it is an injustice to the song to not have any other input on this. So even if you are someone who can do this all themselves, and you're that person, you would be doing this every single day, all your hours, that's what you're focused on. Like to take a synopsis of what you said, like you're marketing yourself, you're promoting yourself, you're getting gigs, you're doing the recordings and all that. Like literally, that's every day. Like we talk about marketing and branding, that takes up so much of my day. That writing and performing and everything is also anything else. But you want me to record myself? I mean, I'm not putting out an album every year. It's going to be 2 years or so, I would say, before I get any content, and that is also something that is the adverse of what today's consumer listener wants. They want content. So
every 5 seconds.
Yeah. So I mean, you as a musician who's doing everything yourself, you're kind of doing yourself a bad
disservice.
Yeah, disservice. Thank you. I was looking for that word. I was almost going to swear. I was almost going to put my first swear in there. A disservice to your music if you aren't multitasking. If you are multitasking everything and not handing this out to other people to help you. I'm super happy to have Kyle from Railroad Park to lend an ear to this. And like I was talking to Crooks and Scourge when we go in there for the album. They're like, we need a producer there. We need someone there who's going to tell us, that's not good. Do something different. We want to do this professionally. Like, yeah, we absolutely need that other ear. The more, the merrier. I've got people coming into the studio with me every single time, and I look for that feedback. They say, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Oh, you should do this. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. And in the moment, we just change it. It goes off in a different direction. And of course, this album's going to take a long time for me to create, but that's the other side of it. But yes, technology has allowed us to do everything ourselves. If you can, and if that's how you start out, and if that's how you start making your business, and that's how you get your name out there, do it. Like learn everything you have to do. And I will also say to the people who have grown up earlier and haven't had that experience and are used to the older way of doing that, learn the new way. Like adapt, or you're quickly just going to go back and I'm just going to play shows and I'm going to fade into obscurity and this isn't going to be a business for me anymore. So you need, that's a constant thing for any artist, is that you need to keep in contact with your influences, your medium, and keep reinventing how you express yourself through that medium. And as a musician or spoken word performance or anything that also involves the recording, whether if you're a theater performance, video recording, that kind of thing. Like, what is, you're not just recording like one camera on a stage and like a whole stage production. You've got cameras on all sides, from behind the stage, from up close, from behind, that kind of thing. Like, that's something to take into account now.
So I think that's a really good point to make as far as like what gets taken into account, what doesn't have to get taken into account, and like, you know, adapting and learning certain skills, and, you know, where do you have control, and then where do you give up control to somebody else because they have maybe a better expertise or can help you make the best possible music or whatever art you're trying to create, right?
As a singer-songwriter, I've always found, like, someone who composes and performs everything myself, I've always wanted to have the control over things, but my happiest moments in music and my favorite aspects of what my music sounds like, I would say a lot of it has come when I network with other people and perform with other people, and they just bring this sound that I haven't heard yet. Like, there's going to be stuff on the albums. There's going to be me and a piano or me and a guitar, but there's going to be a lot of other musicians on this album that I cannot wait. And the song that I'm working on now that I'm thinking I'll perform later, Sundown on a Solitary Crow, I've had another guitarist come in, Ryan Strumfler, who's written some parts for it that have totally transformed what the song sounds like. Chris Cardesi on drums, and has totally just come up. I let him come up with his own parts and everything. I put in my own put of like what I liked and didn't like, but totally changed that sound of the song. My sister's playing strings, Brie Vieira, and that has just, I mean, every other person that you involve in what you're doing just increases what the scope of what you're doing.
All right. Next up, from episode 2, we have actress and creative director of the CTC Theater, Tammy Brown. In this segment, Tammy talks about the difficulty of having to switch gears from a role in front of the audience to one more behind the scenes, and how to define your own success. What was your experience like going from, you know, the actor-actress to now this, I guess, more managerial type position, which I think is recent for you, and congrats, by the way. But has there been kind of like a gear change? Has that been easy? Has it been more like, oh, I've had to deal with things I haven't had to deal with before and put on a different type of hat when working in that way? Like, I have to like kind of maybe separate the actor-actress side versus like the creative director side. Like, what's that been like for you at CTC? And then I want to go into a little bit more about CTC, because it is a well-oiled machine, but I think there's value there. But what was that like for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm like literally in that transition as we speak. But I think for me, like, I talked a little bit about my life as like a freelance performer, and I did that for about 10 years. And it was great, but it was really, really hard, and I was very poor. And I prioritized like doing my art and that type of stuff, and doing work that's like fulfilling to me and challenging and like pushing me as a person and as an artist. And after doing it for 10 years, you kind of reach a plateau. And so you have to have something that's propelling you forward in it. And I was kind of at a place personally where I was like, well, I've done, you know, really what I want to do acting wise. Not to say I don't want to act anymore, but like I've kind of, I'm kind of set with that for a little bit. I've done directing, and so I'm interested in doing that. But like, that's not really super sustainable, because it's not like a million directing jobs every minute. And like, again, that's a whole other level of gatekeeping of who will allow you to direct a show in their theater. So I was in a place personally where I was thinking like, okay, what is next? Like, I've kind of done this thing for a while. Like, what's the next thing? And meanwhile, Chris at CTC, who had been the artistic director for 15 years, he founded the company 15 years ago and had been the artistic director ever since. He's starting to think of similarly, like, I've kind of done this. I'm more interested in development and growing the organization. And the reason we have bought the building and continue to make improvements to the space and our patio, and we've owned 2 buildings, is because of Chris. And so he's more interested in that side, the executive directing business side. And so he said, I really want somebody who can take on the artistic life of this organization.
So you're doing the artistic managerial, and he's doing like the balance sheet, like that kind of managerial. And So I think that's interesting. So they do have that kind of person in place
Yeah.
and does every theater have that, or is that okay?
I mean, every theater is a little bit different, and you can have a theater company that is a company of one, and it's one person, and they do everything, and they manage everything. And I think every theater company kind of starts like that, and then depending on how long it goes and how it grows and how those people want the organization to grow, it will get bigger and bigger. And so CTC, I would say, because of Chris's leadership and also the privilege that he had being in South County and having dad who's like a lawyer and having having connections to like rich people and coming out of Princeton and like all this stuff. Like it's not like he had a lot of help as well, but it was his kind of like brainchild. He always had a plan to grow the organization to be an established thing as well as an artistic organization. So he went from a bunch of kids outside of college doing plays in the summer
and
to
renting the buildings,
and
by the way, right?
yeah, and but when they first started, they would be in like libraries and like storage spaces and all this type of stuff. But his plan was to grow it beyond that. And so he got to the point where now we have like full-time staff, like literally like people whose full-time job is to work at the theater. But that took several years to do, probably like a decade or more to do that. And now he's at the point where we need to expand it further. And so instead of just having one person who's like running the whole artistic and business life of the theater, it's now 2 full-time jobs. And in most established theaters, like the sort of regional theaters or, the what you might call the quote unquote bigger theaters, they have that. They have an executive director that does the business side, and then they have an artistic director. And it's like those two, it depends on like the organizational structure, but for the most part, those two are equals. And they kind of work together. Like me and Chris are going to be working together, but having those separate focuses. And for me, in terms of the transition, it makes a lot of sense because I kind of did what I wanted to do as a kind of freelance performer for a long time. And I think we talk a lot about almost the romance of doing that life of like just being a performer and not having a 9-to-5 job and like doing that. And it is great, but it's really hard. It's always a grind. It's quite draining. And I've done all kinds of crazy jobs, like selling coffee makers in stores and like all of this stuff. And I started to think ahead. And it's like, am I going to be 40 and selling coffee makers in stores still? Am I going to be 50 and doing this or 60? Like, where does this end? And so I think it continues to be a balance in terms of like how much of the grind you want to have in your life, how much art do you want to have in your life, and just you kind of have to figure that out as you go. And also, the last thing I'll say about that is like deciding that, okay, I've done this for a while, time to transition to something else is okay. We have it ingrained in our mind that like as actors and maybe other artists too, that if we didn't go to Broadway or didn't go to LA and didn't have like some hit TV series and didn't, get a Tony or whatever, and then we decide to transition to something else at some point and decide not to just be a full-time freelance performer, that we have failed. We didn't really do it. We're a failure. We must have given up because we couldn't make it, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not true. It's just that like your life is long and it's really draining to be in a constant grind all the time. And maybe at a certain point, it's draining to be an artist. I love it, but it is draining. And so you might want to do something else with your brain and your time for a little while.
Next up, from episode 3, we have photographer Brittany Taylor and her thoughts on the idea and the label of being a professional.
Before I was a photographer, I worked at a camera store, and I watched people come in, drop thousands of dollars on cameras and literally say, I'm a photographer now. And I'm like, yeah, sure. If that makes you feel good, sure.
All I could think of is Gene Belcher from Bob's Burger. This is me now. like just this is me now.
That's exactly what it was like. And it's like, sure, if that makes you feel good, like just because you have the access doesn't mean you're going to be good at it. There's people who spend thousands and thousands of dollars on equipment and call themselves photographers. And it's like, that doesn't mean that you're good. Good is relative. That's fine. I'm sure there's people out there that are like, I hate Brittany's photos. I'm like, that's cool. That works. If that works for you, that's totally fine. But just because you have access to stuff doesn't mean that you're a photographer.
Not to steer away, because I want to get the flip side of everybody having access to images and how that affects you as well. But since we're on this, it really leads into a question I have. In your opinion, what separates an amateur from a professional? Since we just talked about the I spend thousands of dollars, this is me now type of photographer that is out there. What, in your opinion, what is that separation? Is there separation, or is it more? It varies. It's a moving target.
I do have feelings on this, and I'm going to preface with these are my feelings, no one else's feelings. But anytime someone says that they're a professional anything, I feel like you're an amateur. It's like, why do you have to preface that you're a professional? And I know they mean well, like with friends, like do like roundups of like favorite people, like she's a professional photographer. It's like, oh, you make me sound like I just bought a camera and I'm like really excited about it.
So if somebody said they're a photography ninja, would that sound better?
You know what? I'd rather hear that. I'm like, ooh.
There you go. Pro tip, everybody. Instead of putting professional photographer on your business card, put photography ninja. Yeah. So much more intriguing.
I would look at your website. I would take a look after that. Yeah, it's like if you have to preface, like no one's like, I'm a professional lawyer or I'm a professional retail worker. It's like, no, you just do it. You just do it. And that's fine. So if you want to be a professional, drop the professional. Set that aside.
Or add ninja. Creative Capital Show, given the cheat codes in life here.
Just be ninja. No matter what you do, just be a ninja.
Thing plus ninja equals you're good at it.
I'm a yoga ninja as well. You know, lawyer ninja.
There you go.
Sales associate ninja.
Just put all those things on a business card. That's
one card though.
That's black ink on a black card to go with the ninja theme. I don't know how the hell you would read that, but
ninjas could read it. Oh no.
There you go. Like it's got, you have to be a ninja. Anyway,
let's just talk about ninjas.
That's interesting though that this is now turned to the Creative Capital Ninja podcast. Teenage Mutant Ninja Photographers. That's interesting though that the minute you hear professional, you're like, nope.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. Whenever I've gone out to like a bar or a nightclub. Anybody remember those? I remember.
Yeah.
And like I see somebody really loud and showing off money. I just sit there and go, I'm like, oh, that guy or girl or them probably don't have any money. They are making a show of how much they are spending. Yeah, or like that is their entire like spending money after bills, and they're gonna be borrowing money. Like, you know, it's Saturday, come Monday, they're gonna be broke.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the minute you hear professional, you're like, nope,
no. That like it's a wrap for me. It's a wrap for me on that. Yeah, I don't know, and that's why like this is very much my opinion. Other people may disagree, but for me,
I think it's an interesting one. That's why I just want to. I'm asking more about it.
Yeah,
because I was like, oh, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah, I think it's a confidence thing. I feel like not a confidence in yourself when you feel really. It's interesting for me because with photography, it was like the one thing in my life that I didn't question. Like I was like, oh, I took these pictures, I put them on the internet, and I didn't feel self-conscious. I questioned so many other aspects of my life, but that was like the first thing where I was like, oh no, this is it. This is it. This is my work. This is it. And I don't really know where the moment clicked over for me, where I was like, I'm a professional now. I assume it's when money showed up. That's when people consider themselves professional, but then it leads into a whole topic about capitalism, and money is the only reason. Once you get enough money, then you're a real person at something. Like I would like to set that aside, because I think that there's people who have spent decades photographing birds and are not making a dime off of it, but they've worked on their craft for so long. Like, I would consider them a professional at what they do, even though they've made no money off of it. So I think setting the whole monetary aspect aside, even though money's obviously important, we have to pay these bills. I think it's the amount of effort that you put into something and the passion behind it and the work towards it. Like, that is what qualifies a professional to me.
From episode 4, we have national speaker and award-winning activist Ashley Bendixson, and how she turned her tragedy into triumph and her pain into purpose.
I really like what you just said, the whole tragedy into triumph thing. I've not used that phrase, but a lot of times I'll say that I've found a way to turn my pain into purpose, and it's exactly what someone would think. I went through a lot of trauma and hardship in my adolescence, and it completely turned my life upside down from, a 6-year cycle of kind of on and off abusive relationships, a lot of self struggles, mental health struggles, academic challenges. Long story short, by the time I was 19, I was a college dropout, I was homeless, and I was, on the early days of recovering from abuse. And, as much as I was really broken in that moment, I just remembered feeling like I had to partly make up for lost time, but also that I really wanted to do something to give back to other people going through the same experiences. So essentially, it began this crazy journey of just volunteering, getting involved, putting my life back together. And it's brought me to where I am today, where I'm now speaking full-time on the issues that once affected me in my life. I'm an expert on these issues. I'm an activist. I'm a coach. I'm an author. And I've just found a way to turn all of my experiences into, a vehicle to help others.
So first off, that's amazing. And bravo to that. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
We need more people like that in the world. But I don't know why I just said that, but I want to ask and go into, because you had all that stuff going on, right? The abuse, and then the issues with mental health, and then the issues with dropping out of school, issue of being home, so many things stacked upon, one thing after another. Was there a particular moment, or was it more of a gradual change or evolution, or was it one moment that changed your mind, so it was like, I'm going to turn all this around? Was it one specific thing, or was it a number of things to help you go through that transformation? The journey itself was definitely building blocks, one on top of the next. But the moment that kind of changed my perspective was pretty instant. I had, just to kind of give you some details. So my final abusive relationship ended because I was severely attacked. And so I had to go through this whole court process. And I just had this crazy moment when I left the courthouse where I suddenly realized that I was entirely free to do whatever I wanted. I had lived so many years where every choice I made, I had to think about my partner and whether they would get upset at me. And so I suddenly just remember thinking, I can go get an iced coffee and not get in trouble because I didn't think of my partner and get one for them, or I can take the long way home. And I suddenly just realized how ridiculous it seemed that I had given up myself and my goals and my education because of this bad relationship, but really just because of many bad relationships, surrounding myself with the wrong friends. I just didn't know who I was. And I a lot of times I've told this story and said, I had this aha moment, but I really think it was my intuition finally kicking back in, where it was like, Ashley, now go. What have you been waiting for? None of this was ever you. There's nothing wrong with you. And I remember feeling like if I keep struggling, they keep winning, right? My abusive ex is going to keep winning if I keep struggling in life. And that little mindset shift just changed my perspective on everything. And so while the journey was, difficult from that moment on, just kind of having that spark and that change of thought is really where it began. And it's kind of when I knew
I was going to make my life better, and I was willing to figure it out, whatever that took.
So would you say that it's also a process of self-discovery as well? Because you had mentioned through that detailed explanation that you didn't know who you were. I think that happens for a lot of people sometimes, no matter what they go through in life. For a lot of people, they may have a moment where it's like, what am I doing here? Is this really me? So would you say that there was a process of self-discovery after that moment as well, of like, hey, who am I? And like, what do I want to be and what do I want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what haunted me the most. It wasn't the abuse, the trauma, the hardship. It was suddenly realizing I had no idea who I was. And even like, before I dropped out of college, I picked nursing just because my friends chose nursing. And it was like, what do I love or what am I great at? And I never took the time to figure out who I authentically was or what my passions were in life. And it's interesting because even though I felt really self-conscious and I still had confidence issues and I still didn't think that highly of myself, I started to put myself out there and I learned skills that I had that I'd never even recognized, like my ability to speak or my ability to take on leadership roles. I mean, those are things I never even knew were possible for me until I just started putting myself out there. So I definitely learned who I am and what I'm capable of.
From episode 5, we have artist, owner, and creative director Longston of Bad Taste PVD, and his thoughts on how to evolve your creative process and the benefits of being alone in your own world.
Yeah, being a traditional Asian family, they wanted me to go to college and do the degree with doctors and stuff, but I tried that. My dad paid for like the first semester at community college. It was only like, a few, like 2 G's or whatever, but it was a lot for him. And I tried and then I realized that's not my thing and I dropped out and it was just very depressing. Not the fact that I couldn't learn. I'm like, I know, like throughout the school, I was like smart as fuck. Like I was like, on the math team and all this shit. But eventually as I got older, like I knew that I could not sit still and learn from lectures and people talking. It wasn't like I felt anxiety every time I went to class. And then I kept on doing it, and then they were like, "What are you doing?" and stuff. The more you keep on doing stuff for Asian parents, and they realize that this is what you're gonna do, they became supportive in the later years as I. And then they became more supportive, and then they'll help me out when I need to. Like, in the beginning stages, my pops would come to the store and check it out and help me install the fixtures and put up the railings. And
that's pretty awesome. So he was down to like
come to the events. Come to the events. And now as I got older, they're just down and hope it supports me by myself. They don't really want anything out of it. They're just hoping that it sustains and helps me. So as I got older, yeah, they've been pretty supportive, even though I've kind of pushed them to the side and not tell them exactly what I do or whatever. But as I got older, I learned to appreciate that their support means a lot.
So now they know exactly what you do, or do they still not?
No, they come to the store. They know, and they talk to their friends that I do the store and a bunch of different creative stuff. And I fill them in every now and then. So,
did you always know from a young age? Because you're saying like, hey, I tried doing like the serious school college thing. Did you just know from like a young age that, yeah, I'm not going to do the normal path, or was that more of an evolution where as you were getting older and going through life, you just realized, like the normal thing isn't for me?
I don't know. It's a little bit of both. Because since like middle school and high school, I would just keep creating, drawing, wherever I can. I'm talking about like from clothes. I was drawing on clothes and hats and stuff, and people like, yo, it's dope. And then like I would zone out and draw on my arm and stuff. The teacher would like, pay attention and stuff. And then I was on the gift of arts class, and they were like, you could be bigger if you just focus and stuff. You have so much potential. And first of all, I was like, talking to the shit to the teachers. I'm like, I don't know what you mean, lady. But now I appreciate as I get older when every art teacher has said you have so much potential. Now I know what they mean because I have no idea what the fuck that meant when I was younger. And now I'm like, oh shit, this lady was right. I could probably do whatever it is I want to do. But back then I was like, yo, man, what's going on? But I've always wanted to do it because I legit would be I wasn't necessarily like a loner. I was like a loner in school, but I still like knew everybody. Everybody like appreciated like an artsy kid. They wouldn't really chill with them that much, but they wouldn't really hate on them. So like when I got my license in like high school, I would drive to New York. I mean, not New York. Yeah, I drove to New York too. Fuck it. I drove there a few times, but I would drove to mostly Boston on a weekend, and I would just check out like the streets that had like these street artists. And I was like, it's kind of cool.
Was that like more of a permit thing, like the being the loner, or at some point did you have like a crew of people around you? Because you had those 3 other guys who had the initial little bastard with you. Was it like loner for a while, or did you have like a tight knit like support system?
The people, the homies that I started stuff with, I'm still good friends with today. Best friends. We're on like a group chat and stuff. But they understood why it bombed, and everybody's super cool with it. And the crew is like this, like they know that what I'm into, and they're down to support and get down. And they know when I do my own thing. I still do it to this day. I'll drive hours to like a particular art event or convention, and I'll go by myself because they know that it's not their thing 100% anyways. So I still had like a great support system and the homies in high school, but I also had my solitude. And but that was like, just growing up. Like I've always had my own solitude. I grew up with like as an immigrant kid with like a pen and a paper in his bedroom for like since I came here. It's like I'm like only child, so I just know how to be by myself and do what I want to do.
I understand that you were designing pretty much, or drawing, painting, doing some type of art since you were a little kid, right? And I'm looking at some of the badass paintings where by the way, this is, instead of in my apartment, I'm actually doing my first remote podcast. So we're in Long's place. We're at Long's home, and I'm looking at some of the paintings on the walls. What informed your design aesthetic? Like, what were the influences that you were like, hey, I'm going to paint in this style, or I'm going to draw things in this style? Was it like music you listened to? Was it any sports you were into? Was it just things that you saw? Like, what informed how you painted and how you did your art?
Like any artist, it's like evolved throughout the years. Like it evolved from that art class in middle school to high school. That shit was dark as fuck back then, because as a high school kid, most kids are like depressed and listen to the fucking first of all, I was like in high school and middle school when like grunge was popping, so that shit was depressing as fuck. So most of that stuff I influenced my stuff, and being alone, you would create universe. So I think that's why throughout my life with creating, people have said multiple times like, yo, you're in your own universe or whatever. But that's because I was so in my own world that I did create my own like, shit. So like there's on one side there's the lonely side of being the only child, being the only person into art aside from your friends like deeply, so you just search stuff on your own. And then the flip side, the cool part of being alone is nobody else influences you except for the stuff that you look up yourself. So like all the stuff around you, from like the days of music and MTV to like I randomly roamed. I legit in middle school and high school got dropped off while kids were playing outside. I asked my mom to drop me off at the local library, and I would spend hours there. It would be like from fucking 3:30 to like 8, and I would just roam those books, and eventually I just found like dope shit, And then as a young artist or creator, you just copy a lot of old people's art, like from Salvador Dali to Michelangelo to Picasso and stuff, and street art, and then you eventually just find what you like, and then it influences your current style. And as I got older, it becomes a little more refined, it gets less cartoony, it becomes a little bit more personal reflection, and everything now is super thought out and stuff. Like if you could tell, back in the days when like 10 years ago, it's not like guns and girls.
From episode 6, we have Moses Siam and how the Creative Capital Show got started, the story behind the first episode, and having the audacity to follow through with an idea, even when you have no idea of what the hell you're doing. But it was just funny how all those things converged. It went from literally the course of an afternoon, hey, what's up? Joking about a marketing campaign, a bad one, getting mad about RISD and lack of business training.
Yeah.
Hey, we know a lot of creative people. Hey, no one talks about the behind-the-scenes stuff. Cable cars closing, leather couches. Oh my God, we need to do this show with just no idea how we were gonna do it, but we got the couches. We thought, like, for God knows what reason, we thought, all right, we got the couches. Everything else will be easy. We're on easy street.
Yeah,
now.
I think
Like the couches were definitely. And you had the studio space. We had space to put them in. I'm like, wait, we got a space to put them in, and we got some couches. We're good. We'll figure out the rest of it.
Oh man, we hit the ground running though. We had man. It's crazy how the span between now and then, you know what I mean? Obviously there was a lot of things that were going on in our lives, well, more or less my life.
Well, I had some stuff going on too. It was just less like personal related and just more professional, which led to where I'm at now, which I'll go into in a little bit. Actually, let's just get into that right now because we were at your studio space, which was in Providence, that you were sharing with some other people. We put the couches in there, and then it was. You know what's funny? We were like worried about all the other little details and talking about that, and yet like the basics of like how are we going to do the audio, and because I did have an audio background, but it was like how are we going to do the audio and the show format and getting guests, like the super important stuff. I don't know why, but we just didn't focus on that. It's like, no, man, we got to get a good logo. We're going through these art. Like, we spent time going through art books, getting a logo.
Yeah, we
and
were
not like, hey, our guest going to be? Like, how many times are we going to do this? How are we going to set up scheduling? Like, what's the equipment we have to buy? It was just weird where our heads were at. I don't know if anybody else does this, but like, focus on the most important stuff first. Like, if you're doing a podcast, focus on how you're going to, like, the audio equipment, where you're going to publish it to, like, how you're going to get it on there. Are you going to do ads? Like, who are you going to do ads for? How are you going to get listeners? Who are you going to book as guests? How long is it going to take you to edit an episode? Are you going to edit it? Show format. Which, by the way, we already had the idea of steal the show format from Business of Hype. So if Jeff Stapler, if you're listening to this, thanks, you're an inspiration. Also, good artists copy great artists steal. I'm like, we're just gonna steal that format because it works.
We were kind of just
interlude, like conversation, reflect interlude, conversation, reflect interlude, conversation, reflect interlude. I'm like,
that was the
perfect.
baseline, yeah. And I think just the whole idea of you having the audio background and me having the visual background, we're just like, all right, we'll figure it out. I think that was really,
we got this. And
yeah,
like, no, we didn't.
Yeah, we were just I remember countless bar nights of just like trying to just like format it, you know what I mean, and just really format it. But it was a great experience, man, and it's gonna, I think, going forward, where like just now, like just seeing, like just sitting here and just like seeing how everything's working, the machinations of it all is really, really, really awesome, man, because this is initially what I had pictured it being. Like when we first got up, I'm like, it can't be that complicated, like it can't be rocket science. But then when we would edit, the editing process of like I don't want to just jump forward. I don't want to jump too forward to like the first episode and just like the whole process behind that. But like once I started realizing like the really like meticulous stuff, I was like, oh, okay, we definitely we definitely might. I definitely thought this was gonna be a lot easier than it actually is. But I mean, it's just great, just like understanding all these little nuances and stuff. Like you were learning a lot about branding and copy and stuff, just like with certain things that I was bringing up, and I was learning about like just even before we even started recording, the whole what was it called? What was it? What's the term? Was it copy stage? No, it wasn't. It's
gain staging.
Gain staging. Like just that term, I had never heard of it, but when you broke it down to me, I was just like, oh, I know what that. I was like, oh, that's what you mean. I know what that's.
You just never heard a term for it. Gain staging, and I'm not going to get into it just because that was literally like 20 minutes of just testing everything out. And we were testing out gain by talking about gain staging, which I think is hilarious, but is literally just staging your gains or staging your levels in a way that when you're boosting or attenuating gain in one area, everything else is equal and brought up equally or brought down equally. So that way you're not boosting it in one area, then maybe unintentionally boosting another area, and it's just keeping everything nice and even when you start, so that way whether you boost or lessen gain in one area, it's even across the board. Makes your life a lot easier when you're doing anything audio related. If you're recording, if you're a DJ, if you're doing podcasting, go look up gain staging. If you don't know what it is, maybe you'll find that you've already been doing it, but another technical pro tip. But I think that was the balance between us, which I thought was good, was that you were, not to say that I'm not a creative, like I've always been interested in creative stuff and do creative things, whether it's making music, DJing and stuff. But I also had a technical background. I had the audio, the audio engineering background from school, worked at a technical company. So
I like the term dabble, I think we were just dabbling in a lot of things that overlapped, that complemented each other,
And we were dabbling in each other's worlds because I wanted to know more about visuals and branding and how all that worked.
Yeah.
And you knew that way better than I did. And you knew you had the network of creators better than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were like, you wanted to learn just more how things worked. And you were just interested in like, well, how do they make it sound that way? How do they do this? And I was like, oh, I can explain that easily. But I think as we were getting deeper, I was realizing your world and your side of things was not so easy. I was like, oh, I didn't know that much work went into like X, Y, and Z. And then you were realizing my world and like my side of things wasn't that easy. Like, oh, like buy all this stuff. It's not just like hook a USB mic up to a computer, which you can do, by the way. But there's even another host of problems with that. It's like, oh, okay. Like as we're doing it, we were starting to figure out, and this was even before the first episode happened. This was just testing stuff out. Like, we were going through art books, just trying to figure out the font and like the color scheme to use for the branding. And then, I'm going through the equipment we have to buy. I'm like, okay, well, how many guests are we going to possibly have? If it's you and me and we have 2 other people, that's 4 people. Okay, so we're going to need like 4 mics. We're going to need 4 mics that sound good. We probably want condenser mics because of the studio we were in, which was the studio that you were sharing with other people. It was in a big building that it was in like an old mill building, which, there's people above us, below us, on the sides, there's hallways, it's old, it's wood, there's like pipes going through it. Not that it was a bad space, but there's like all these things you have to account for sound.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, we need condenser mics. Okay, why condenser mics, Jason, and not handheld mics? Oh, because condenser mics have a tighter pickup pattern, which means they're not going to catch all the background noise, or not as much background as if you have like a handheld stage mic, because the stage mic is made for the stage. So you want to capture that. Whereas that's why you have the condenser mics, which are you'll see more of those in recording studios, because they only pick up so much. They don't pick up 360 degrees, whatever is around it. It only picks up really what's right in front of it. That's going to help when it comes to this. Then it's like, all right, we don't need the best mics in the world. Why? Well, we're not a recording studio. This is just audio and people talking, which makes things a little bit easier when you're editing. So we need them to work. We need them to sound good. And then it's like, all right, well, what do we do after that? We recorded it. Or we're going to have to edit it. Should we invest money in a big recording software? No. Well, why not? Again, we're not putting on like auto-tune and doing all this. Like, we want it to sound good, but we're not a recording studio. We just need a way to get it saved onto a computer and do like basic editing. Audacity's free. You know what I mean? It's like, how are we going to publish it? Oh, so this podcast uses Anchor, and I'm going to make a note. I'll probably do an ad for Anchor right here. And,
Why not?
But Anchor at the time, now it's owned by Spotify. It's still this way though. You hit one button and it puts it on all the platforms for free, saving you a ton of time, and it's free. We're not being charged. There's no like tiered or anything like that.
Kind of reminds me of like Linktree for IG when you could.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, now we can publish this thing to as many platforms as possible. So it's like, okay, we had to think about all these little steps. And it was funny, like as we're going through it, it's like, it's giving us ideas of questions to ask depending on who the guest was. And our first guest, and then it's like, hey, how do we get guests? It was like, well, I can talk to my buddy Dave, because my buddy Dave, episode 1, had just made the leap from, he was working retail, and like he had just left that 100%, like before he was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that he was 100% making money off his talent of being a musician. He was doing it a couple different ways. And it's like, okay, here's our first guest. We're going to hit the go button and we're going to see what's going to happen.
I think he was a great first guest to have also, because a lot of the times when we were having our meetings at these like various bars and establishments,
even in the creative world or the white collar world, even from being in tech, business gets done over drinks.
Yeah, always. And I remember like you would like ask an opinion of a bartender or a business owner, like and they were, I remember seeing their faces light up, and it's just like, yeah, we so need that. You know what I mean? Like, just
Yeah, I was just trying to like get like hey, let's just ask people if like let's just see if this show is really a shitty idea or
Yeah.
not. Let me just ask some
We
random
had brought
business
it up-
owners.
We brought it up to the cable car owners initially, you know
And they
what
were
I mean?
like, "What?"
Yeah, they were like, "We'd love to have you." That's why I got their numbers to this day. And I think when we had, I remember we collectively assorted the list of guests. And I remember you chiming in and being like, we should just bring Dave. We both know him. He's a close friend of yours, but
Yup.
there have been times where we've all gone
Yeah,
out.
all hung out and had a drink, and it's just
Yeah.
like, and he, a lot of people still want to be musicians and stuff like that, and it's easier than ever to record at home and put a song out on Spotify or whatever, and it's like, well, is it really that easy? And he's a guy, like, he's not famous, but he's making money 100% off his music, like sustaining a living.
And the educational side, I didn't know.
Right.
Prior to the episode, I didn't know he was teaching. I didn't know he was teaching piano. I believe he's a piano instructor.
That was one of the income streams. So it was just to talk about it's not what you think. But we learned a lot in that, and I think. From episode 7, we have brand and culture director Aaron Clements and his thoughts on how entrepreneurs should approach brand and culture.
The individual who is a director of anything, meaning a leader of people, right? A division, right? It doesn't have to be the boss of the company, but if you lead anybody else, any team members other than yourself, right? You have an opportunity to use all of the things that are important to you, all of the integrity you have, all of making the world the way you think it should be, right? In that role, right? You can learn from what brand and culture directors do, what HR does, right? There's something to bureaucracy. There's something to everybody having the same level of equity and protection in a scenario, right? We tend to throw things out, particularly when we talk about corporate, because we've seen behemoths, abuse their power and just seen them become, seemingly world-eating monsters, right? Beyond reproach. So we throw out some of the good stuff that works, right? Which is
Especially if you're trying to be at like such a large scale,
right?
Like sometimes you have to do. I'm not saying all the time, but like sometimes you have to do it just to the sheer size of the amount of people you have to take care of from a customer standpoint, from the internal companies that just keep the lights on.
Right. Simple things like actually having an employee handbook that can explain to people what's expected of them up front. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be full of legal jargon, but something that a person can actually look at to say like, wait, what's the expectation again?
Pro tip, don't make it an edible Google document, because that happened at the startup I was at, and that was a mess. So don't do that. There you go, pro tip of the day. So
onboarding, another important one.
Make that consistent.
Expectations.
Another thing that didn't happen for me. So anyway,
and you're not there anymore. You see?
So it's like, like this guy's describing a lot of things that happened to me. So I get that from like the director standpoint. You were saying how at the Dean you worked at the front desk and then you kind of worked into.
Mm-hmm.
So what could somebody? And then there's a third part to this question too. But what could somebody at like the boots on the ground level, like I don't know, like the entry level worker, like how can they affect like culture and branding for themselves and also for the company? Like what can they possibly do and like how can they go about it?
I wouldn't suggest that it's their responsibility to affect the culture of the place, other than to accept the personal responsibility to treat their staff, their peers, the way they need to, right? The onus is not on the employee necessarily to build the positive work culture. The onus is on them to be a part of a positive work culture, right? And to agree to the community rules and uphold them, right? So the onus is on them to recognize if a male is treating a female employee wrong, if a male is treating a non-binary person wrong, right? That it is their responsibility to speak up and say something. First, there should be a comfortable enough scenario in which that person witnessing, right, the HR nightmare, right, should be able to speak to the person who's suffering and saying, I'm so sorry, that this is happening, right? Second, there should be some sort of clear process with which to say, whoa, 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 you need to fall back. This is not how we do it here. This is not, this is not acceptable, right? Without feeling like it's a snitches get stitches scenario, right?
Yeah.
Which is a big thing, right? Worried about squealing, tattletaling, snitching, right? No one's worried about snitching on something that they think is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Right? You're worried about getting in trouble. You know what I mean? If the system is so that you don't feel supported and you don't feel connected to those community norms, right? Like if you are in the wrong because you are not following these community norms that we set, where everybody here gets to get treated with respect, regardless of who they sleep with, right? What their hair is like, right? Who they love, right?
Even like things like superficial things like what they wear. Like I've seen
What they wear.
I've seen companies go like nuts about that, and I'm like, why?
That's also a whole nother episode, part 3.
Oh yeah.
Part 3. Right?
This is going to be
Part
its own
3.
separate podcast.
We can just call one HR Nightmare and talk about all of the things, right, that companies in their reaction, right, to liability, to concerns, to conflict internally, rather than managing people and managing behaviors, which are what human beings are full of, right? Behaviors. They clamp down and just eliminate. And they say, well, no, we can't do that. We don't do this. We don't do that. If everybody just dresses the same, there won't be a problem, right, with the dress code, right? So you set a strict dress code, things like that, right? So it's a very reactionary process for all of those things. Here's how you can and can't dress. Here, you can't wear jewelry because that's too personal, this and this and that, right?
It's an interesting balancing act. And going to the third part of my question, now let's say you're somebody starting your own business, starting your own company, big or small, right? Regardless of the business, like I want to open a pizza place, I want to open a bake shop, I want to run a frozen lemonade cart, whatever that. Like I want to be a content creator. What can or what should people do who are starting their own business or trying to be entrepreneurs themselves? How should they think about brand and culture, and especially if they're participating in, I guess, how should they think about brand and culture, and how should they consider it and not be considered a culture vulture? Because that's a term that gets that's been used in the media and by X amount of people for various different reasons. That's a whole other episode that could be dedicated to that.
Indeed.
But how could somebody starting their own business or even running their own business now, how should they approach brand and culture, and how should they think about it?
Sure. There's a lot I could say about that. Broadly, they should first, before they hire a person or work with another person, the second they decide that they're going to run a business of their own, they should look at their own biases and affinities, right? They should investigate themselves, investigate how they've lived their life, who they've lived it around, and that's what I mean by affinities, right? Who are they currently surrounded with, right? And I don't mean your neighbors that you live next to, right? Like, who are the people in your life? Do you have a homogenous group of people, right? With respect to, gender, creed, race, right? Do you live a lifestyle, right, that's very, very specific in terms of how you view culture and things around you, right? Once you've investigated your own biases and your own affinities, you can hopefully start to recognize that other people have their own set of cultures, right? And ethics connected to those cultures, right? And you can make space for them once you realize that you have them too, right? Which is a thing that a lot of people don't do. So anyone else that is different than that person by any metric becomes othered naturally, right? This is not like me. This is not like me. That's not like me. This other thing is definitely not like me, right? But they haven't decided what is me, right? Who am I? What are the things that make me who I am? What are my biases? What are my affinities? What is my lifestyle, right? How do I describe that? Once you can describe your own, you can just start to look at other ones as their own individual decisions, right? that they are welcome to. You know, that's a lot. That's very, very, you know, what I want to say, boiled down, right? You know, that's a very boiled down version of the work that needs to be done just to start considering what it means to work with other people and affect the lives of other people, because that's what you're doing when you commit to a business. You are affecting the lives of the people you work with and the people that you serve, you know, your stakeholders at every point. An important note I'd like to make about business owners with what they can do with respect to their responsibility within brand and culture is making decisions about who they work with as far as vendors, right? Do the vendors that you work with reflect your values, right? So investigating your own biases, affinities, and letting that dictate what your values are, right? You have to have some sort of values in order to do this, in order to be in this business landscape. You can't go at business at having employees, right? Servicing the public. You can't go at this letting the chips fall where they may, right? And responding to the needs of your stakeholders by saying, you know, well, I don't know, right? You have to recognize the humanity and the reality of your employees and the humanity and the reality of your customers, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a step one. If you're going to be thinking about branding culture, it's not about how to be cool. It's not about how to be on trend, which is where that culture vulture thing comes from, right? This idea that being on trend is a smart business tactic, right? Totally erases the fact that it's communities of people that start trends, right? And when you take the trend from them and place it in a national spotlight outside of their control, right? And with no connection to the originators of that trend, whatever the trend is, right? Whatever it is, that is entirely co-opting, right? And stealing, right? It is stealing, right? That doesn't mean that there's not sharing, right? Among cultures. But you know if it's been shared with you versus taking it, right?
Yeah, like,
you know.
and if they don't know, that just raises even weirder questions. It's like, well, how do you not know?
Right. So absolutely thinking of those things.
From episode 8, we have bartender and entrepreneur Michael Silva, and the story of how throwing a party in his parents' basement led to the start of a business.
But I did kind of know that the bars that I did go into, though, or the places that I did go to around here, like, again, people don't look like me. Bros don't talk like me. They ain't walking like me. You know what I mean? So, and like, it's Rhode Island. Like, I don't have to explain how it is out here. Like, it's still the Northeast. You know what I mean? So like, I can feel the difference every time I walk into a room, and like, that was a big issue. And the thing is, it's like, I know that I could take this and really put some people onto some dope ass shit who would want to try this. Some hard-working professionals who were looking for something a little bit different. And I felt like I was able to take what I've learned or take some of this and present it in a different way. And I did.
So now, actually, I think that's a good lead into the next question I have, because you said you had that pop-up and then things that you wanted to do. That pop-up that you said was in your basement. Your parents' basement. Was that the precursor to...
my entire life right now?
Your entire life, but I guess more specifically, BAS, bass people.
Yeah,
I didn't know if it was BAS or bass.
It's just bass. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, looking back, I probably should have spelled it differently, but I love the way it looks, and I'm never going to change it. So how it really happened, though, so when I was working there, I was working on some really cool bartenders. Like, the first couple guys that I met that I was working on, I fell in love with those dudes. You know what I mean? Like, they was putting me on. I mean, looking back, there was, you know, like, this is the only time I'm gonna do this on this pod on out loud, and like, I don't really usually give myself a pat on the back, but I'm really good at making people comfortable. I'm really good at like letting you be yourself. I'm really good at being myself and being comfortable who I am.
From the times you served me drink, I concur.
Yeah, I'm really comfortable. I'm really good at making people feel comfortable. And like, I used to make these guys feel like they was the coolest dudes in a room. And like, because to me that they were. And I don't think they got that from a lot of people. So I hung off every word that these guys said because they were very talented bartenders to me. And they was willing to put me on game, you know? And one thing that one of the dudes, the head bartender at the time who was there, and they used to treat him they used to shaft his ass. Like, they did him dirty. He don't even bartend anymore. He just like, fuck it, I'm over this whole thing. He's living a whole different life now. He moved out of state, whatever. And he was like, yo, you need to get a new pair of shoes to work in, and then you need to buy a bunch of syrups, a bunch of juices, or make the syrups, whatever, and practice on your friends. Like, invite your friends over, practice on them. And that's how the pop-up started. Because I literally just invited my boys over on some like, yo, look what I can do. You know what I mean? Like,
gotcha.
Quick shit. Like, I'm talking about my boys. Like, there weren't no chicks involved. Like, it's just my boys since I was a kid in high school. Like, they just came over. And then... But my parents' basement, I mean, I was living out of there. It's a Cape Verdean basement, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's fully outfitted. It's got like its own entrance, a living room, kitchen, washer, dryer, bathroom, shower, 3 bedrooms. Like, it was a big basement. And then the kitchen, they kind of built like a counter/bar area. And I used to serve on that. And it was perfect because that's the way my dad built it. Because again, my parents used to... All they did was throw parties growing up. They throw massive parties. So like when my dad when he single-handedly built that basement with his own 2 hands, he built it with that in mind, that we could host people and that we could just entertain folks.
So how would you describe the growth of Base? I want to make sure I'm saying it right.
Yeah, Base.
How would you describe the growth of it? Because it started out in your parents' basement, but then it grew into pop-ups at other establishments, other spots. What was that trajectory? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Trajectory like, and how did you facilitate that growth? Because there's, you know, as far as from what I could see, and maybe from like what the outside would see, it's like, oh, it's this event, it's this thing, it's this night at these establishments. But there was obviously some kind of growth going from parents' basement to that. So could you talk about that a little bit? Just how you facilitated that growth and what that growth was like and what you had to deal with and pain points, any of that kind of stuff.
Word. So, I mean, eventually, right, so after I did the first, like, just invite my boys over and, like, look what I can do, like, it really started to turn into, like, full-blown pop-ups. And we were inviting people on strategic dates. Like, one of the first ones I, like, really did in my parents' basement. Like, I, like, really went all out. Like, we had a menu. Place was outfitted, like, a bar, low dim lights. There was snacks. There was candles.
Was there a DJ as well?
There wasn't a DJ.
Music?
I was playing. I mean, I curated the music list and like.
Gotcha.
I had really. I mean, at the time. I mean, another thing people always give me credit for, and I'm gonna talk about myself. Who gives a shit? That like one of my friends says that I'm always listening to music that people should be listening to next year. Or people should be listening to.
You have good taste. That's
you know what I mean. So like I felt I was just playing some tunes, and I felt the tunes were good, whatever. So I took care of all that, and it really just started growing organically. And it got to the point where I was like, "Word, I need to get out of this basement because I had outgrown the basement." But I had done like 4 or 5 pop-ups down there, really.
So how did you transition from getting out of the basement? And I think that's so funny, getting out of the basement, because that's like a term that you could use across like so many different things.
So many terms.
You got, but you did get out the basement.
We outgrew the basement. And really, Instagram. Instagram.
Okay.
Instagram, because I would post about it on my Instagram, and then like people would be like, "Oh, what's this? What's going on?" And like just asking questions.
How were you choosing, or how did you foster the relationships that you were able to do base at like other establishments or involve other entities? Because I've seen some base events that do involve like certain DJs and certain people around town, or it's at this cocktail spot or this bar or this place or this event. How did you foster that? Like, how did you make that transition of like, hey, you're at these places now, and that like your thing is the reason to go to that place. Maybe it's not the only reason to go, but like you're making it like a thing. Like,
I hear you. So that started. I mean, first and foremost, again, it starts through Instagram. Because we posted a story, I posted on my story little snips here and there, and like I think it was after the last one I did in my parents' house. The next day, I worked the shift at that place there,
Gotcha. Okay.
And at the time, one of the bartenders there, this woman named Rachel, who was just if she's the reason why, she's the one who kind of like, she invited me to do a pop-up she was running a supper club with a friend of hers, this woman named Siobhan, a woman who used to own Berry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
they just had a beautiful baby daughter.
Because that's how I met you.
Yeah, that's how I met you at Berry. Yeah, so it was them. So before they opened up Berry, they was just doing like supper clubs out of Siobhan's apartment. It was a beautiful, weird space. Like those pictures are gonna last forever. It's a beautiful space, and and that was like our first ever like pop up, basically not in my parents' basement. So to me, that was like our first official one because we invited folks. We gave people invitations. We charged people to come. The ones at my house, I didn't charge anybody anything. You just come through. You know what I mean? Like I just come through and chill. But this one, we were charging folks. It was very curated. It was curated down to the T, and it really threw people for a loop. And then we just hit the ground running from there. Really, again, through social media. And then, but like Rachel knew a lot of people, and I got connected through a lot of people through Rachel, who lives in Italy now. She just like packed up her shit and bounced. I wish she still lived here because I feel like I'd be doing so much more, but we're moving at a good pace without her anyway. At a great pace, actually. But I wish she was just here because she was like an inaugural part of the team. You know what I mean? Like without her, I would have never really got started, kind of.
She was like a day one.
And she was really like the one who kind of like, she's the one who introduced me to Siobhan. And she's the one who kind of got me into that space, and she helped me with a bunch of stuff. She also worked a bunch of events for me too, so whatever. And like, again, it was through Instagram, and like, it was through people just, honestly, like, if you move in a certain way, or you present yourself in a certain way, or you work a certain way, people are just going to be naturally gravitated towards it. And like,
Gotcha.
if it looks, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, I want to go pet that duck. You know what I mean? So
do you think it came from like an authentic place?
I think so. I think it came from an authentic place because, like I said, like I wasn't in this industry before. Like I knew a few people, like, you know what I mean? Like I know a bunch of people in Rhode Island because I'm from Rhode Island. I went to URI. I have a twin brother here. We know a lot of people. So like, but this is a different realm that we started to meet, and it really just started to grow organically. And like, and then it was people just reaching out. A lot of the things that we did, it was people reaching out to us.
From episode 9, we have beverage director Jen Davis, and her thoughts on how some people think that those within the bar and hospitality industry don't make a lot of money because those jobs don't require a degree, and why that perception is 100% false.
Are there things that you wish your customers or even like just the non-spirits industry person knew about your industry and about your job as a beverage director? Like, is there any aspects of like, I wish the public knew X, Y, and Z?
I wish they knew it was a real job.
Sounds like a real job to me. I mean, I know I made the joke about like directing beverages like Spielberg, which would be hilarious and terrifying if they started, if like you're like, hey, beer bottle, go over that way, and it started walking.
I just imagine like Fantasia going on with like booze. Like sounds really magical.
No, I mean, if I walked and I saw that, I would be like, number one, what the hell did you put in this drink?
Yeah.
Or if all my friends saw, I'd be like, we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
This is gonna be some like Exorcist horror movie shit about to happen. But anyway.
Yeah.
I don't understand. So people don't think it's a.
Oh my God. I just got asked this weekend. They're like, so like, what else do you do?
I do that. All right. Whoever that person is, what the hell?
It gets asked all the time. So like, that's the like weird thing about working in this industry and working in not just the beverage industry, but the hospitality restaurant industry all the time.
Specifically the job of beverage director, they're just like, what else do you do?
Well, they don't know that I'm a beverage director, but they see me like working behind the bar, serving them a drink. They don't know what my title is. It's not like I'm walking around with a name tag that says like beverage director.
I thought you meant like somebody in a conversation asked like, what do you do? And like, oh, I'm a beverage director. And then they're like, what else do you do? And I'm like, that's a really weird way to reply to that.
No, it's just like guests in general. Cause like,
okay.
Yeah. But like guests in general, just like, they just don't know. And especially like right now with COVID, like you're mostly getting served by like beverage directors, bar managers, owners, like, and then to like ask like, oh, but what else do you do is like kind of a dick move. And then like also not understanding like I'm running a business at the end of the day, and it's like no different than running any other business. It's, I still have to make money for so keep the lights on. But it's like, for some reason, like it's always like kind of looked down upon, because like it's also the job that like you don't need a college education to get, which is the beauty of it. It's like one of the few occupations that like you don't need even a high school degree to excel in. But for some reason, it's like it's looked down upon, even though like I make more than most of my friends who've like gone to like onto school and getting their masters and work in this type of job. And it's like,
I always found that real funny too, because like I've seen people just, because social media shows the best and worst of humanity, ladies and gentlemen. I've seen people be like, oh, if they're complaining about money, they should do a different blah, 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 blah. And then they did do a different job, because it's weird. Like, people want to shit on that job or that industry as it's like, well, what else do you do, right? But then if the bartenders weren't there, or if people running the bar weren't there, and your local like watering hole or wherever you go shut down because of that, then you notice real quick.
Yeah. But they also have like no idea. Like, they have no idea. Like, most of us just have like very normal lives. We just work very different hours. So it's like, they think like we get asked all the time for drugs. Like, people always ask bartenders
I almost
and
spit
servers.
out my last.
Yeah. They're like always like, oh, do you have Coke, or do you know like a place where you can get Coke? Just assuming that all of us like are just like these like drug addicted, like drunk, like hot messes. And it's like, no, man, like I have
way too many movies and Netflix shows.
I'm like, no, I have to like go home to like my 4-year-old and wake up with him at 8:00 in the morning. Like, I'm not like, no, I'm going to go home after this and like go to sleep, because that's what I do. Like, it's just a fucking job. Like, you would never walk up to an accountant and be like, where do you get the good blow, man? Like,
actually, I feel like the accountant would probably know more.
Definitely.
Because especially around all that money, like, if anything.
Yeah.
All right, see, people, you're getting the gems here. If you want to know where the good cocaine is, go talk to your accountant. Don't talk to the bartender.
No.
Go talk to the accountant.
Or like, they'll tip us in like weed or drugs. I'm like, okay, like, what am I going to do with this, like, half-smoked joint? Like, I'm not going to pay for my kid's school with this. Like, what good is this?
Also, it's one of those, like, I don't know where you've been. What the hell?
I know, like, I think they think, like, it's cool, but, like, we're really just doing a job at the end of the day. And it's, like, no, like, again, it's, like, different hours, but, like, we're still running businesses here. Like,
I'm just, like, giggling a little bit, because now I'm just picturing... Like, what if that person's just insane and that's how they pay for everything? Like, they go to McDonald's and they're just like, here's some weed.
Yeah.
They go to their counter for the taxes. They're like, here's what are the fees for the taxes? I'm like, well, here's your X amount of cocaine that I paid for you to do my taxes with, Mr. Accountant. Like,
well, it's like, think about jobs like that are on the same pay scale as like bartenders, bar managers, whatever. Like, it's people who like work in banks, in accounting firms, and like all these like quote unquote normal jobs. Like, we're all getting paid the same. We just work different hours. And like, honestly, to be a bartender, it's a little better, because like you can make the same money that like those guys make in 3 nights, instead of like having to work like 5 days a week, 9 to 5, So it's like crazy, because like you would never go to those people and be like, where's the drugs, man? They're just working a job at the end of the day. It's weird.
Like, you don't go to McDonald's and do, or maybe some people do, which I like.
But like,
I don't know if I wanna
McDonald's,
meet
they're
those
not
people.
making the same money as bartenders. Like, we're making more.
I'm just wondering, like, who goes to their bank? It's like, oh, all right, we opened this account for you, Mr. James. It's like, oh, thanks, man. Like, what's the fee? It's $300 in fees. All right, I'm gonna pay you with this bag of weed.
Yeah.
Like, what in your brain is like, oh, but bar, it's completely normal, right? It's like, no.
And there's definitely like some bartenders out there who are like, oh, cool. Like, thanks for the joint, man. Like, this is great. Just like there'd probably be an accountant out there who'd be like, oh, thanks. I love smoking weed. This is really nice. But like, for the most of us, we're just like,
I'd be concerned how they did how that accountant manages my money after, though.
Whatever. Like, everyone's got their thing. But like, I can't fucking pay my bills with the fucking joint you just gave me,
I still need this thing called money. Like,
yeah.
Like, unless we start going into a drug-based currency in this country, I still need money to live and pay for things.
Yeah, we're far away from that. So yeah, I guess like I just like want people to know it's a real job. Like, when you come in, like, into any like any establishment. They're people like, this is their job, this is their profession. They've chosen to do it too. Like, it's not like, you know, it's something that we had to do because we were too stupid or just like couldn't figure out our way in life. Like, no, this is something like we chose to do. Like, I went to school for a completely different thing. Like, I went to school for art history. I was like on a track to be a professor. And then I was like, I fucking hate artists. Like, I hate them. And like, if I'm going to be a professor, I'm going to have to teach them all the time. Like, this sucks. I could never
I have to be
live with
around
myself.
all these people I hate.
Yeah. I was like, I could never do this. And like, I was bartending my way through college, just like most people. And I was like, you know what? I'm making way more money. If I like continue in this art history thing, like, sure, I'll be a professor one day, but I'm going to like work for this museum and make like $36,000 a year. Like, I'm making double that, like working 3 nights a week. Like, what?
It's like,
why wouldn't you?
I'm making more money. I enjoy the people here more than the artist. Even the guy who just paid me with an ounce of blow.
Yeah.
I still want to hang out with that guy more than the artist.
Yeah.
And I'm making more money. Maybe I should just keep doing this.
Yeah. Totally.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
From episode 10, we have brewmaster and owner of the Providence Brewing Company, Efren Hidalgo, and how he transitioned from being a beer brewing hobbyist to a full-time brewery owner.
What was, for you, the transition of like, hey, I'm like a hobbyist, right? I'm doing this at home.
Yeah, that's a great question.
To like, oh no, like, this is, I'm going to make money off of this.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to become a business for me.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so it started off as a hobby, turned into a passion, which evolved into an obsession, which eventually turned into an opportunity. And that opportunity started off with the early on idea of I can do something here with this, because it was also at the time where you had some of the more innovative people out there creating craft beer, like Tony McGee from Lagunitas, and you had Stone out in California. So you had all of these great, unique breweries that were inspiring. Hold on. It's
No,
I don't think
going.
it's for me.
I keep that stuff in there.
Yeah,
it makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Keep going.
I'll lower my hat a little bit more. It's not me. But you read their stories and you get caught up in that passion. And that was the one thing that came out of it for me, was the obsession was a passion.
Gotcha.
And that passion was something that I realized I enjoyed making and brewing beer and sharing it with friends and colleagues. Then that turned into, okay, well, if I increase my equipment size and I do this, okay, I'm saving money in the long run. You don't think about it immediately.
It's what you're telling yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little lies we give ourselves. But eventually what that ended up leading into was, sitting down and looking at the hard tack numbers and saying, okay, well, if I go this big, what can I produce? What's my barrelage? How much do I have to sell? Are the laws favorable? Do I only have to do distribution? Damn, I wish there was a way in which I could sell direct.
So you were looking into just out of passion and curiosity at first, besides like, hey, I want to share this beer with everybody. Oh, like, well, what happened if I if I turn this into a business? Like, what would I have to deal with? What are the legal? Because I know beer laws, even between Rhode Island and Massachusetts, which we're not too far from, is like, that's wacky in and of itself. And then like the internal beer laws. So you were just looking up all these little details, thinking like, okay, well, what am I going to run into? Like, what are the scenarios here?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Are there self-distribution opportunities? And in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, there aren't. The law's a little vague. Let's put it that way. The law is a little vague about self-distribution. You could read it in, like in the, the Brewers Association. When you look at the laws for self-distribution for the state of Rhode Island, it says you can. But the reality is you can't.
Because I think there was a blanking on the documentary that was talking about how like there's lobbyists for the bigger, like the I think it's SAB, it's AB InBev or Sab Miller, and how like they have lobbyists to make sure that the laws, because for anybody listening out there, and I think I've had this conversation with other people, you can't just take your beer, go to a bar or restaurant and be like,
I have this, wish business was this easy, but like, I have this beer I've made. I run this company.
Right.
Do you want to try some? Do you like it? Cool. Sell it in your bar.
Right.
Like, you have to go with a distributor.
Right.
But all the distributors are backed by lobbies that are owned by this. So it's like, you have to get on their trucks, which that's a whole other thing I'm wondering, right?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's a relationship thing, right? I mean, part of it for me when I got into I guess when I finally put on my first pair of big boy pants and opened up the brewery, the aspirations were never there to distribute. It was always originally about building a solid base, building a reputation, getting to know the customers who eventually, many of them became friends, getting to be more one-on-one and building that community. That's always been the driving force for me with Providence Brewing. Because when you look back historically, Providence Brewing Company, two blocks down the road is the Capitol Records building, and that used to be the original location for the American Brewing Company, which eventually became the Providence Brewing Company.
I love that you're doing this because it transitions right into my next questions anyway. So this is we didn't plan this, ladies and gentlemen. Like, but I wanted to, not to cut you off, but I wanted to kind of hark on that, like, hey, when I opened the brewery, you said I put on my big boy pants. So, you transition from home brewer to like, I'm gonna go larger scale. What was the transition of, I'm gonna do this business? Like, it seems like you were passionate about it, then you were like looking up all like the ins and outs. Yeah. What was the transition of, I'm going to invest money or somebody else's money or a bank's money or a loan? Like, what was that point of like, no, I'm going all in. Like, I'm investing myself into this.
Balls to the wall.
Yep.
That moment happened back in 2013. I remember that because I had secured the rights to the Providence Brewing Company trademark. And at that point, I really kind of said, if the opportunity rolls around, I am going to see what I can do to start small. And what is that going to take?
So that's interesting. It was just getting the trademark first.
Getting the trademark first, because I think every home brewer, and if you follow home brewing, you'll notice that a lot of home brewers will give themselves a name.
Yep.
Right? It could be, Sparhawk Brewing. And Sparhawk happens to be a street that I used to live close to, and who knows if that exists.
I think with the old logo of, which I love, the dog with the space helmet, I thought it would be like Astromut or something like that.
Yeah. That was Izzy. And that's a memory from my childhood, and I brought that to life as our mascot. But the moment that I decided that I was going to do this was an opportunity when I was transitioning from one full-time job out of that and coming into another full-time job. In doing so, I was able to kind of sell off some of the stock that I had at that time for that company, and use that as the initial investment, my own funding. And
so you're self-funded.
I am self-funded.
That's got to be awesome, not having to like. Is it just you, or do you have a business partner that you went in with?
I have a business partner, Don.
Gotcha.
He invested into this early on with me as an opportunity, and he's played a huge role in helping me. He's been the voice of reason in many cases, because I am the type of person that I'm not afraid of failure. I don't give a shit if this doesn't work out for me in the long run. Doesn't matter. I attempted something that I'm very passionate about, that I love, and if 10 years down the road it doesn't work out, so what? Who cares, right? I needed someone like a Don to be able to say to me, hold on, don't think like that. You need to think like this right now. We're going to think short term, and we can think about long term. We need to do these steps.
So a couple of just side questions from that. So I think it's awesome that you both funded this operation yourselves, because then you don't have to answer to a bank or anybody else. It's just you answer to each other, and that's it. Did those previous jobs that you said that you got the stock from, was that the user experience jobs, or was it so was user experience and then into user experience again? Or
I left one company in Mass and started working for another company here in Rhode Island.
And did you eventually leave that company, or you're still with that company?
I actually left.
Okay, so you did leave that company. Gotcha.
Yeah, I left back in September. I was going through, unfortunately, my dad, who passed away in February, was going through some issues. So I had to. I was getting pulled apart in the middle of COVID. Full-time job, a full-time job at the brewery. Family. My parents, and all of those things. Something had to give. And I chose to remove the one appendage that was really kind of getting in the way, and that was a full-time job. Surprisingly,
the one thing you were actually able to, that you can be like, oh, I can live without this.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
Because family was the most important thing with with an ailing father and my mom, and it was just one of those that it was a no-brainer. So I left one job in Mass to focus on. To come to another job here in Rhode Island, and that afforded me the opportunity to really kind of say, okay, now I'm going to pull the trigger and put this thing
together. And that's it for this episode of the Creative Capital Show. Thank you for listening, and a special thanks goes to all the guests featured in this episode. The Creative Capital Show is hosted, recorded, edited, mixed, and produced by me, Jason Sylvia. You can listen to the Creative Capital Show over at our website, creativecapitalshow.com. We're also available on Anchor FM, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast hosting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe. Helps the show out a lot. And be sure to follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the show, and until next time, keep on creating.